Well, g'day and welcome back to the shed. And today I've got this enormous thing dwarfing my bench. I say this thing because I'm not 100% sure what it is. I bought this radio, must have been 6 or 8 months ago, quite a while ago anyway. And it took quite a while to arrive. I was negotiating with the person who sold it to me. He didn't send it, and I prompted him a bit. I'd already paid him for it. He still didn't send it. It took quite a while for me to actually get it from him, and when I finally got it, it arrived packed in an oversized box. Oh, great big box it was, stuffed with an old sheet and a dirty old pair of tracksuit pants and some old clothing, which all absolutely stank. So needless to say, I threw all that away, and I stuck the radio in the corner, waiting for a time when I could get to it. I do remember from the ad it had an issue with the dial glass. It's got a chip out of the corner, which I'm hoping I might be able to do something to fix up, because getting a dial for this thing is going to be impossible. From memory, it's some kind of a Bush, but I don't know what model or anything it is. I haven't taken the wrapping off it since it arrived months ago. So I guess the thing to do is to unwrap it and just see what we got to deal with. I'm not sure if I should be wearing rubber gloves for this. It's probably been in the shed for long enough for any contamination to go. Just taking some of the finish off there with it, but I don't think it's a big deal because it will probably need completely refinishing. There we go, that's one piece. Looks interesting. I remember that this radio has a cracked dial glass, and I think that's going to probably cause me a lot of grief. I might be able to fix it up. I guess the chances of getting another one for it are just about nil. I think it's mouse dirt falling out there. Oh yeah, look at that. It's got a big hole in it. I'll see what I can do. Might be a hopeless case, this one. There's all sorts of dirt falling off this onto the bench. Of course, the way I make these videos, I never know when I start a project if it's going to work or not. I make and publish the videos as I go, and it's anyone's guess whether I'll actually fix the radio or not. So we'll see. I'm starting to think this might be the one that proves to be my nemesis. Looking at it, it's pretty awful. Yes, it is a Bush. Okay, there we go. What's that? Oh, my okay. So it's got push buttons. So we've got off, gram. The buttons seem to work. Long wave, medium wave, short wave, and VHF. And the button seems to be jammed. Yep, the FM button is definitely not going to play. We've got, I presume these are bass and treble controls, and the glass is quite a mess in the corner here. I don't know what I'm going to do with that. There's a big chunk missing. It might be inside. I remember thinking at the time I could possibly make something up with epoxy resin that would at least be less obvious, and I can probably duplicate the gold striping to some extent. I don't know, it depends. If anyone knows where I can get a glass for this, that would be amazing. But I guess first I better see if I can get something going. Let's have a look at the back of it to see if I can see what model it is for a start. Okay, so turning it around. It's got no back plate on it at all, so finding out what model it is might be difficult. And see straight away it's got a missing valve there. I don't know. What's this? That's the cord. Oh, there's a valve. Okay, so this is an EL84. So it will probably, the pins are all bent on it. The way it was packed, I'm not surprised. I'm surprised it arrived at all. I'm not sure which socket that goes in, probably there. So we've got another missing valve here. We've got two missing valves. Oh God, look at this. Dial string everywhere. It does seem to have two pretty good speakers in it though. At these two, and I wouldn't mind betting this is an electrostatic tweeter in there. I don't know what it is. It's got two wires heading to it straight off the output transformer, so chances are that's what it is. Still can't see any kind of model identification here. There's a wooden cleat missing from the corner there. Yeah, absolutely no clue. So I guess the first thing to do will be to try and work out what model it is. Maybe take the chassis out and see what we're dealing with and see if there's maybe some clue on the chassis. There's something loose in here. There's another valve. There we go. This one's an EF89. Okay. We'll put it there and we'll work out where it goes. Probably in there. Don't know what this piece of metal is doing here. This is obviously the AM, well, appears to be the AM tuning. This will be the FM section in here. And up in the corner there's the UK license label, and just says Bush Radio Limited, Chiswick, London W4, which doesn't help me very much at all. The only other legible identification is this sticker. It says 220/05874. I guess 220 will be the voltage. No idea what plug was on it because the plug's been cut off. I'll just write down a list of the valves in it. That might help me to identify it. From the look of those speakers, this thing might have been a bit of a performer in its day. Anyway, I'll start with the valves that have fallen out. We've got an EF89. I'm writing these down. We've got an EL84. Here we've got an EZ81. An EABC80. I think. Let's have a look. Yep. AKA a 6AK8. So I'm writing that down. I'll put him back in. Here we have, I hope it has the markings on it, an EF80, is that an EF89? I think that's a 9. So here we have an EF89 and an ECH81. And here in the FM section we've got an ECC85. So I'll see if that helps me to identify it. These tubes are probably common to an awful lot of models though, so it will be difficult. Possibly the cabinet is going to be the easiest way to ID it. Anyway, I'll go and do some research, see what I can find out. Well, it's the weekend now and I've done a bit of research and I found out that this is a Bush VHF64 and I've got a schematic for it. It's actually spread over 3 pages, so I'm going to have to tape this all together to make sense, but at least it's all there, so I've got something to work off. So I guess the next thing to do is to see what's inside. I'll take the chassis out of the cabinet and have a better look at it. Just before I do, there's a couple of things to note. The cabinet has this nasty crack in it along the edge there, and that looks like new damage. I'd be pretty certain that's a result of poor packaging, and the usual gentle handling by Australia Post. This radio was only sent from Albany, which is a few hundred kilometres south of here, but in Western Australia, so it didn't have to come that far. Another odd thing that I noticed is these buttons. Now the backs of them are angled. This goes back this way, and then these four are angled upwards this way. It looks as if they were made that way, but I can't imagine why. It doesn't seem to make any sense at all, and it makes them look like a bunch of crooked teeth, really. Another piece of inspiration by the Pommy engineers that designed this thing, I suppose. This will have been a knockoff of the German sets that were around at the time. Probably the English thought that they could do better. So I guess we'll find out how much better they did. I notice there's a big gap in there too, so the chassis isn't sitting centrally in the cabinet, but that's hardly surprising. I would expect that this will have a panel in the bottom too, which will allow access to the underside of the chassis without removing it. So I'll just have a look at that. And yes, it does have a panel on the underside, held in by screws, unlike the German ones, which usually just slide out. I'll find a screwdriver that fits that. This one will do it. Okay, let's see what we got. Well, there's obviously the underside of the mains transformer. You've got an electrolytic there, a variety of caps and things down there. I'll just move it around a little bit to get the shadow out. We've got any number of Hunt's capacitors down here. They're all going to be leaky, no doubt. This looks like the switch set up here. And moving down, we've got this is the bottom of the RF section, and the FM tuner is up above this. I've got more Hunt's capacitors, cobwebs, a 0.01 on that must be the bass pot there or something, treble I think that size. Here we've got the tuning drive, which with a bit of broken off dial cord on it. Yeah, I can't do much with it like this. I just thought I'd have a look and see what can be done. Oh, here's a piece of glass, no doubt, off the dial. I don't know if that'll do me any good. Another thing I missed before when I first looked at it was this ferrite aerial, which has come out of its mountings, but it clearly sits in here, and at least it's intact, so that's good. So I noticed the speaker connections are screw connectors on top of the, I guess, the output transformer here. The electrostatic goes to this one here, and the other main speaker connections are here. So I guess that makes it easy to disconnect it. Also, looking at the cabinet again, this whole side piece is loose. In fact, the whole cabinet is broken. I think it must have taken a fairly heavy knock in transit. No doubt the post office managed to drop it or run it over with a forklift or something. Also pretty obvious that this valve has been knocked out of its socket forcibly. It's the EL84, but look at those pins. That's bent right out. Hopefully I can straighten them without damaging the valve. That is, if it wasn't damaged by being knocked out in the first place. I suppose worst comes to worst, I can get another EL84 from somewhere. Well, I guess I better take off these speaker connections. So this, I imagine, would be the on the primary of the output transformer, with plate voltage on it, common to the two. So that's the speakers disconnected. The other thing I'm going to have to worry about is the ferrite antenna, and it's a bit awkward to get to up here in the dark, but I think if I can just pull it out of its brackets, Of course the grommets are dry. Not too dry though, it's coming out. There we go. Okay, so I'll just lay that on top there. And the only thing remaining are these 4 quite easy to get at screws through the bottom of the cabinet. Okay, so that's them. And that should, I think, be it. The chassis should now come out. So here goes. Yes. And in here we've got the usual debris, plus a couple more pieces of wood that have fallen off it. I'll put them with the other broken off pieces. There's nothing else in there I think I've missed. A pool of melted wax, which probably says something about the state of some of the capacitors in here. Another bit of broken glass, no doubt from the dial. Other than that, nothing remarkable really. I will take the speaker panel out too, because it seems to come out in one piece, because I want to have a look at the state of the speakers, see what they're like, if they need any work or whether they're okay. I'll start by undoing these screws. He says, failing utterly to undo the screws. Let's just try this one. Yes, that's moving. Okay, so with those screws out, this should lift out. Oh no, it doesn't, because it's attached to the plastic front section. I think what I'll do instead is take the speakers out separately and then work out how to remove the panel. Okay, so here's the first one, and we'll see what it's like. Looks to be in good condition, moves freely, that's good, and it has a separate surround which I'll just leave in place for the moment. Okay, I'll just sit that one back in there, and work on the next one. And now I've got the other one off, so let's have a look at it. And yeah, again it looks to be in very good condition. Some slight staining on the cone. Different cone profile on the two speakers. They obviously have a different frequency range. This one possibly handles high frequencies better, and the other one might be more the bass driver. I don't really know, but I'm guessing something like that. So I'll remove these, put them aside, and there's the electrostatic tweeter, which I may not have had to remove, but there it is. It seems to be intact. I don't know much about these or whether it's okay or not, but I guess there's one way to find out. Interesting that this is a German electrostatic tweeter, Grundig or Grundig or whatever you call them, depending on whether you're European or Australian. So obviously the English couldn't come up with anything to do the job. And now I've got the speakers out, I can see that there are two more of these screws that were inside the space occupied by the speakers, and these no doubt hold the speaker panel to the plastic surround. I'll just put this aside as well. Okay, let's see if we can now lift. Yes, at last we can lift the wooden panel off and up and out. Okay, well, we've finally got it out of the cabinet. And I'll put this aside. This is going to need a lot of work, gluing up, refinishing completely. Oh well. Looking at it, there's one thing that I find a little curious. This doesn't seem to have any kind of clutch mechanism to separate the FM band from the AM. This is clearly the FM tuner, and it seems to have a cord which goes into it there, which I presume would operate some kind of variable permeability tuner, so it would have ferrite cores that move in and out of a coil. I can only see one of them though. There may be another one somewhere, but it all seems to operate off one spindle, and that worries me a little bit, although the cord that runs the variable permeability tuning, if that's what it is, in the FM section seems to be intact and working, and I can see the end of a core coming out there. I don't suppose this is any kind of clutch mechanism. I don't think so. The other thing, of course, is that this has a rectifier valve. It doesn't run a bridge rectifier like most of the German sets do. So yeah, that's something I'm a little bit more used to dealing with, and it means I don't have to change out a selenium rectifier, if of course I ever get this thing going. Oh, it's starting to rain. I think I will take out this dial glass and investigate what I can do to piece it together, or at least scan it and see if I can make up a facsimile. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with that, but clearly there's not much point in restoring the radio if I can't get that sorted. So I've pieced together what parts I have of the dial, and it's not very good. The rest of it, of course, is okay, and I'm not really sure what I'm going to do with this. I guess the idea might be to scan it and see if I can reproduce something. Reproducing the gold colour accurately would be difficult though. If I printed it with 4-colour process laser printer at work, I could probably get something half reasonable. I'll see what I can do, but this end where it's badly broken would be a real challenge, to put it nicely, to replicate. After I've scanned it, I will try making something up with epoxy resin. If I made up a jig for it and poured resin into this, if I can get it smooth enough, paint the back, paint the gold stripes on it, and then paint the back, it could maybe look alright. It's always nice to have the original dial, but I have my doubts. Well, it's as cold and miserable a day as you'll ever see in Perth, so I may as well be in the shed working on this as anywhere. Certainly not going to have fun out in the sun. So I thought I'd start cleaning this off. Hard to know where to start, but I'll start on this front panel before I handle it too much. It'll make it easier to see what I'm doing, and then I'll go through the usual thing of just checking the transformer, checking that there's no shorts in it or anything like that, possibly replace some capacitors and give it a test, see if it fires up and what we get. At least that'll be somewhat diagnostic of what I've got to look at. But there are a lot of those horrible little Hunts capacitors in this radio, and I suspect that I'll have to replace all of them, so there's quite a bit of work ahead just doing that. Anyway, let's just clean off the worst of the dust here and see what we've got underneath. Don't like the look of this. This transformer seems to have had some wax or something melting out of it. Just down here. And if it's had it, then that's pretty much a deal breaker. I doubt if I'd ever get a replacement for this transformer. It's probably not going to be like anything I've got in a spare chassis around or anything like that. So look, first up, I'll just knock some dust off it, and then we'll see if we have a viable transformer or not. Not much point in going any further with it otherwise. We've got this big electrolytic can mounted outside the chassis on the side here, which is a little bit unusual. And looking at it, it's got three capacitors in it. Let's have a look. Yeah, can't see where they go at this point. It is probably cactus after all these years, so I guess I'll be replacing that. I could potentially just replace it with capacitors on the outside of the chassis here. I don't know about stuffing it. Probably not. It's not like this is a rare vintage radio or anything, so preserving originality to the extent of stuffing the capacitors seems a bit silly, especially when I'm going to change all the caps underneath. That's of course if I've got a viable transformer, and I guess I'll check the output transformer as well, see if that's going to go, because that would be a bit of a deal breaker as well if I can't get one of them. One, I guess, positive thing I noticed is that the chassis appears to be aluminium, so there's no rust on it anywhere. There's rust on the other bits and pieces, but not on the chassis, and it looks to be in good shape. Well, that's a bit better than it was. I'll have to find a way of holding this chassis upside down. I don't yet have anything that'll fit on it to turn it upside down, and it's a bit hard to work on it as it is. It's not stable in any direction. I'll have to find something to do with this too. One thing that had occurred to me that I can do is just check across the power cord, see if I can have a look at the DC resistance of the primary on the transformer. I'll be hoping for something in the region of 50 ohms, give or take quite a bit. Anyway, nothing showing there. I'll just press one of the power switches. Okay, that's showing 20 ohms by this meter, which is a little bit lower than I would have thought, but it has continuity, it has some resistance, so it's not a dead short. Another thing I can do is have a look across the output transformer, and so looking across here, we have about an ohm. I'll just check that for 0. Yep, about not even that, half an ohm. I hope that's not shorted. It does have some resistance though. And the other thing I can do is check the secondary. Okay, and looking at the secondary, I guess it's these two wires here, and we're getting something there. Go up to 100. Yep, so it looks like the output transformer's not dead either. We don't know about the secondary of the mains transformer, or whether it's even got an intact heater winding. Something's melted it, or something's made it get very hot at some point, so I'm a bit worried about that. Well, I've made up a stand for it. Actually, I reused an old stand. The only thing I had to do was make a cutout for the filter caps on the side here, and I put a strip across here to hold the ferrite antenna. So I should be good now to turn it upside down, and we'll check out the transformer and anything else I can, and perhaps then fire it up. We'll see. There's a lot of those Hunt's caps in there though, that worries me a bit. So let's turn it upside down and have a look. It's a heavy little lump. There we go. Just brush some of these cobwebs out, make it a bit easier to work on. Okay, so now I've got it upside down. Let's have a look at this transformer. And I hope you can hear me over this rain on the roof. Here we've got the power switch coming in from the cord, goes straight to here. So this will be the primary here. We know the primary is okay because I tested it back through the cord before. The secondary is going to be, I think, these blue wires here, which lead straight to the rectifier tube. So that'll be that one and that one. So let's just have a quick look across them. And I'm looking straight across them for the moment. So we've got the meter set on 2K. Let's have a look. 187 ohms across the primary. Okay. Now I can't see any centre tap here, but the centre tap is grounded on this chassis. So if I just check them to ground, we should see one side on each side. So we've got 97 ohms to ground on that side, and on the other side we've got 91. So that looks pretty good to me. So it looks like the primary's okay, the secondary's okay. This one here was, I think, from what I can work out, is the ground for both the 6.3 volt filament winding and the centre tap. I can see a big fat wire from this one. That gauge wire, it must be the filament winding. So I'm dare saying this is also ground for the filament winding. I'll see if I can find where it is. It's probably this one. And it's got 0 ohms on it. Oh well, on that range anyway. 0.4. Not sure what this one here is. Nothing. No connection to ground anyway. Alright, so that looks like the filament winding to me. So I'm thinking that this is all good. Another thing that doesn't look very good is this waxy here, wax capacitor, and you can see it's been dripping wax. It's obviously been getting hot. Now this one runs from the plate of the output tube to B plus here. Just measuring across it. I'll just put a clip on it here and see. Oh, we've got chook wars going on there. Don't know what's going on there. Okay, so we've got the meter on 20 megs. See what we get across it. All the valves are out, of course. 10, 12. I'll let it settle down for a minute. Yeah, I mean that doesn't mean very much, but at least it doesn't look like a dead short. Not at low voltage anyway. I'm not sure whether to replace it or not before I do anything else. Okay, I put a plug on it, and I've got it on the dim bulb here. Now at this stage there's no rectifier valve in it, so nothing will get any further than that. It won't be applied to the caps or anything like that. I'm just going to see what we've got coming out of the secondary of the transformer. Doesn't tell us a lot, but I'll do this before we start. So we'll go on, and we've got a faint glow from the dim bulb, which surprises me. We have a dial light there. Let's just see what we're getting. I've got this set to 500 AC volts, so we've got from there, we've got 222 on that side of the centre tap, and on the other side we have 222, 3, can't make up its mind, 222 or 3. That looks healthy, and they're balanced pretty well, so that's pretty good. Okay, back up the right way up again now, and I've taken out all the valves. I've written the valves on the chassis just to avoid silly mistakes. It's too easy to put the wrong one in the wrong socket, even though you have the reference of the schematic there and everything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the EZ81 rectifier tube in it, and then I'm going to check out if we've got B plus. At least that'll be a start. Gee, that's a bit of a stretch. Okay, so with that, now where am I going to monitor B plus from? Let me just check. So just looking at the schematic, we've got B plus, and I've drawn it out in red just because I like crayons and kindergarten stuff. And it goes to this tapping on the output transformer and to this resistor R41 here. And R41, if you look over there, is 10k. So I think that's possibly the best place to pick it up when it comes out there. And looking at the top of the output transformer, we've got this 10k resistor here, brown, black, orange. There's a red wire leading to it back down under the chassis. So I'll be willing to bet that's B plus coming up from there. I'll put this clip on it and remind myself not to touch that when the radio's going. The other side will of course go to ground, so I'll find a ground here somewhere. Here goes nothing. Let's turn it on and see if it goes bang. Okay, so here we go. I'm running it through the variac this time because we have the rectifier tube plugged in, and that means that the capacitors will be in circuit. So I'm not going to just put full power on it straight away, or we might have magic smoke. Not that that would be bad for entertainment value, but I'd just rather not at this stage. So that's off, it's on dim bulb, variac is set to 0, and it is plugged in. I think, no it's not. Would help if I plug the variac in. Variac is plugged in and on. So plugging this in here. Now these meters, I have the digital multimeter on the B plus, and I've just hooked my analog meter up to the mains to see, or to the power cord basically, to see what voltage is actually reaching the radio. So with the variac on 0, I'm going to turn it on. Nothing happening yet, not surprising. I'll just start to turn this up and we'll see what voltage we're getting here. Now this is on the 250 volt AC range, so you've now got 50 volts AC going into it. And for the sake of the caps, which probably haven't been used for a long time, I'll just leave it there for a few minutes. I'm not really into reforming capacitors, but just for the initial power up, I'd rather they didn't explode. Okay, so I'll let that marinate for a few minutes. I'll just turn it up to 100 volts, I guess. And I'll just let it sit there for a few minutes. We have a volt of B plus, but I don't think that means anything at this stage. Oh, it's coming up a little bit, 2 or 3 volts of B plus. It suggests that the output valve is actually doing something. It is coming up. 20, 30 volts. And I'll just let it sit there and cook for a few minutes. Okay, that's been a couple of minutes, and I just realised that I've got this meter on AC volts, so I'll put it on DC volts because we're looking at plate voltage here. We've got 113, which isn't too bad. No signs of smoke or distress, so I'm going to turn it up now to 150 volts at the set. It's showing 150 and we're getting, well, B plus is coming up. Settling around 185 volts maybe. Okay, so that's settled on 196 volts on the plate. We're on 150 going into the radio, so I'll just crank that up now to 200 AC going into the set. Still no sign of smoke or distress, and B plus is starting to increase a little bit. We're on 262 at the moment. Okay, so that's settled on 275 volts on B plus. I'm just going to wind it now up to 230 volts or so. It's about 225 there. Just about there would be 230. And we're showing 308 volts. So that suggests the transformer's working and all is well. I just decided to check the chassis to ground, so I've connected my other multimeter up. This is ground off the dim bulb, and this is on AC volts, and that's showing 105 volts, 104 AC to ground on the chassis. So I'm glad I didn't touch it. I don't know what's going on there, but there does appear to be a short to ground on the chassis. So I'm going to turn it off now and see if I can work out what's going on with that. For some reason I just want to prove it to myself. I didn't trust that other meter. I've got this multimeter now hooked up to between the chassis and ground. Of course this only has a two wire cord on it. It doesn't have a ground to the chassis. So I'm just going to turn it on again and just see what this shows me. AC volts to ground, 40, 41. That's not what it was showing before. And this is on the same thing as before. It's got 230 volts. And 42 volts AC from the chassis to ground is still of some concern, but I'm not sure what's going on there. Could be one of those electrolytics is short. It could be anything. I really don't know. I'll put it on DC for a minute and see what DC volts to ground we've got. Nothing. So why have we got 43 or 44 volts AC to ground from the chassis? It could maybe just be floating. It could have absolutely no current behind it. I don't know. Okay, so I've now put the meter between ground and the chassis and on 20 milliamps, and it's showing, well, 0.01 of a milliamp. Zero current from chassis to ground. I don't know what it's going to say on volts now. I'll just check it, see what it says. We're looking at AC volts here. 51 volts. But no current. It's on 10 amps. 200 milliamps. 20 milliamps, so I think it's just floating. It just doesn't have a reference voltage. Okay, so I'm reasonably satisfied that nothing bad's going to happen with that. I'm going to put the rectifier back in, and I think for the next step what I will do this springy clips are a bit, there we go, and I'll also put the EL84 back in. I'm going to have to straighten these pins though, so I'll try and very carefully straighten them. Let's see if I can straighten them a little. It's getting there. It needs to go in a little bit. Now this one. Well, that was fairly successful. It's as good as I would expect. It's not too bad at all. I am going to give the socket a clean out though. So I'll give it a spray of electrical clean and lube. And put it in. Where are we? There. I might have to also put in the preamp valve, the EABC80. I was going to see if I can get any grid hum from touching the pickup input. Just attaching the shop speaker leads to the output transformer. Handy these screw terminals, although this is fairly dodgy putting them on this way. But that'll do for the moment. I'll come up with something better later on. Okay, so plugging in the EABC80 as well. And of course I'll need to select phono on the piano keys. I'll need to look at the dial glass to work out which key that is. Okay, it's the first one from the left after the off button, so it must be that one. So I've got the shop speaker hooked up, I've got the preamp, the EABC80, the EL84 output tube and the power supply rectifier plugged in. I'm still monitoring the the B plus with this meter, and so I'm going to plug it in. It's on dim bulb now, but the variac is out of circuit, was turned up full anyway, so let's just see what happens. Got heaters in, a heater in the EL84. I can't see the EABC80 heater yet, but there is quite a lot of light on in here. Whoa, I don't like the look of that, that's off. Okay, there's clearly something shorting or doing something very nasty in there, so I'm going to investigate further. I might have to do a recap before we power this up. That certainly looked like a cap shorting or something. There was no sound from the speaker at that point. Just on a hunch, I'm going to cut the lead to this .001 cap that effectively runs off the plate of the output tube, just because it looks particularly unhappy. And I'm going to plug it in and try it again and see if we get the same effect with the dim bulb. I don't have the speaker on it, so we're not going to hear anything, but I'll just see what the dim bulb does. So here we go. It's dimming right off now, and nothing appears to be happening. Watching very carefully for smoke and things. And the dim bulb seems to be coming up. Normally it's got a slight glow in it. Given that there's only 2 valves in, that's probably to be expected. So that's not now showing any signs of distress. What effect that cap would have, I'm not absolutely sure. But that is looking reasonably normal, I guess. Alright, well look, I'm going to hook the speaker back up to it and try again. Alright, so here we go again. Got the speaker hooked up to it now. It's still on phono. Turning it on to dim bulb and watching it very carefully. I think the volume's on max. I just have to check that. Bulb's starting to come up. Is it? Just slightly. And I'm not hearing anything at all yet. Nothing, not a sausage. Right, so let's see what we get from the pickup. Oh! Well, that's pretty promising. So we have power supply and amplifier working. So I've hooked up my iPad with a podcast of Dr. Carl on it, and I've just connected that to the pickup input and turning the volume up.
Or the whole thing collapses. Yep. So instead we use this trick where we take little dishes, spread them out, and then add them up together.
Were you saddened when Arecibo fell over?
I was. I went and visited it in 2019.
Oh, you're kidding? You've been to Arecibo?
Yes, in 2019.
Can you just spell it so the audience can look up it?
Arecibo.
And it's a kind of a natural bowl in the mountains in Puerto Rico or something? Yes,
Puerto Rico, that's
Puerto
right.
Rico, yeah.
And if you see...
So that's pretty good. We've got power supply and amplifier working. Okay, it's the next day, and after that result I'm feeling lucky, so I'll put the rest of the valves back in, and I'm just going to see if we get anything. I suppose it's a bit much to expect, but we'll see how we go. So plugged it in, it's on dim bulb, turning it on, and we've got pretty healthy glow from that dim bulb. This obviously draws quite a bit of power, and of course, bearing in mind it still has all those Hunts caps in it, which are undoubtedly leaky. But we'll just see if we get anything at all. Turning it up. Now it's still on phono, so I'll try medium wave, which is the 4th button along. Not much point in trying long wave. I'm not going to get anything on that in Australia. One good sign, I guess, is I'm not hearing any hum, so it suggests the power supply filter caps are okay, at least for the moment. I'll still replace them. Old electrolytics are not to be trusted in my book. Anyway, let's see. Oh, it would help if I put an aerial on it. Okay, let's try an aerial. Still nothing. No noise, no nothing. No, there's nothing there. Nobody home. I notice the dial light is very dim. I'm wondering if I have too much restriction on it. I might try a bit less restriction. Oh, that's hot. Okay, I have here a 200 watt globe. Sadly I don't have 100 lying around, but a 200 is better than nothing. So I'll try that, turning it on, and absolutely no glow from the globe at all. And wait for it to come up. I'm now hearing some crackles. Something happening there, I think. Ooh!
Judged by the criminal standard of proof, the outcome of that, if the prosecution were successful,
we have ignition.
That standard of proof would be that there would be punitive consequences. Ryan England. So England subbed out, Ralston on. Callahan marks in the middle of the ground. Goes, turns immediately and sends a left foot ball in the key direction.
That sounds like the ABC. Very ordinary reception. This is at full volume, so it's certainly not picking up the way it should.
I think you're going to have premiership year sides, GWS. And the men had a chance to make a few dollars in the mill.
I'm also not entirely comfortable having that lower restriction. A 200 watt globe is barely providing much protection, I don't think. Well, that's promising. I suppose I could try FM. I don't really expect anything. And of course it doesn't have an aerial plugged in. I'll try doing that. Maybe, I think it's that top terminal. Plug something into there. But no, nothing. No FM. Not even a hint of reception. I guess that's where the FM aerial goes. I'll try the bottom one, but I'm pretty sure it would be the top one. No, nothing happening there at all. No, so there's nothing happening on FM, but at least we have AM reception. I'll put it back onto medium, so that's phono's the first, long wave, short wave, medium wave. Oh, of course I've taken the aerial out.
And before, having recently been apprehended on their arrival from Canton.
Rose it, kicks inside the 50, there's a free kick, looks like it could be going to one of the Giants. It's against Zerha, it's going to Connor Iden.
That is very poor reception, and it seems to be fading in and out a bit, and with the number of potentially leaky Hunts capacitors in here, I'm not surprised. I am surprised we got anything at all. but FM is a stretch too far, I think, at this stage. Well, I guess we're off to a good start with this one, better than I expected. I didn't expect to hear anything from it at all at this stage. Obviously there's still a very long way to go with this radio. It's surprising we got any reception from it at all, but there's all those Hunts capacitors to replace in it, and I've put in an emergency order with Carl because I don't have enough caps in stock to replace them all. And I don't know why the FM isn't working. That's another thing I'll have to look into, but that is going to have to wait till next time, because we're running out of time here and I can't really proceed further without those capacitors anyway. One good thing, I noticed that Manuel Caldera from Electronics Old and New has done a series on this very radio, so I've been watching that, binge watched them all last night, and picked up quite a few pointers. So thanks very much, Manuel, and I'll be using that as a reference as well. So thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I hope you can join me for the next one where we'll take this a little bit further. Bye for now.